Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mean Green Gridiron podcast. I'm your host Billy Sierra, and I am joined once again by the new Mavericks Shadow GM Carter Lacey. Carter, how you doing, man?
When you introduce me going forward, NIU, we can call ourselves bowl champions.
That's right.
Uh, Other than that, life's been good. It's been a couple months since we recorded. I think it was pre-bowl game, so um, nice to have that win under our belt, I guess. And I think in the game preview pod, I just really expressed how important it was for this program to get a postseason win, and we knocked that off the checklist. So now the Neil Brown era can fully commence, and I'm excited. It's fun to be back talking about North Texas football. And it's especially fun to have a post, or I guess a retrospective season pod, and have optimism going into the next year uh, for where we're headed, even with all the uncertainty and changes. So yeah, there's optimism abound.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously it's been a little minute. We're here in February talking about talking about a bowl game, so it was a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of hiatus, but yeah, no, I mean, like Carter said, winning the game was huge. I think that the 2025 team finishing 12-2, finishing ranked in the AP poll and the college football playoff poll, those are both huge accomplishments, or all of those are huge accomplishments for a group that obviously no surprise, sadly, that basically everyone who helped achieve that is has now departed. And but look, I mean, if you're gonna it's the nature of the beast at this point. And if you're going to have that situation happen, at least you have some hardware, at least you have a I think more I think you've elevated your status as a program. And I think without getting into the specifics too much this or right away, I think that the bar was raised in terms of the guys we brought in under Neil Brown. I think Neil Brown himself as a coach, to me, really he looks the part. Like, he looks like a coach that probably wouldn't have considered North Texas in 2011 when Dan McCarney was coming in, picking up the scraps after the Todd Dodge era left the program in shambles, or even when Seth Luttrell did. I think Neil Brown is a higher caliber coach
For sure.
than we've been able to really bring in the past. And then to, like I said, the threshold for what kind of football player you have to be in order to get picked up by the program, or get recruited to the program is elevating as well. And I anybody who has followed my work on Go Mean Green over the years knows that I've done a lot of recruiting analysis, and just looking at the guys, looking at some of the old McCarney, or even some of the Luttrell era recruiting classes compared to the caliber guys we're bringing in now is really night and day. And testament to the program. And I think NIL is a thing now where if your NIL is good, that's going to be more of a program mainstay than faces. If you have the money behind your program to reload, then that's what's going to maintain your program's stability over the years, because again, the faces are going to come and go. So anyways, all that to say, yeah, for 2025, great season. Drew Mestamaker, want to point out that we played our bowl game last year in 2025 as well in January. So he started 15 games for us in the Big 2-5, and went 12-3, had well over 4,000 pass. He led the nation in passing. Just really one of the better redshirt freshman seasons in college football history, if you look at quarterback prolific passing numbers. So just want to give a shout out there. Obviously, he's off to Oklahoma State, but would be remiss if didn't mention what kind of season and year that he had for us. Carter, what are some of your thoughts about kind of final departing thoughts on the 25 squad?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned, coming in with Neil Brown this year, you would hope that the setup for the transition period and where we're headed next year is a little bit better than it would have been in years past. I think definitely last year was a floor raiser, if you want to use that term, for a season. At least you hope it would be. You hope that a 12-2 kind of media attention grabbing season like that definitely elevates where your program can go when you are the size of North Texas. So obviously, like you said, very grateful for all the guys who helped put that together. It was a really fun season. Um, I definitely the most fun season I think I've had a part of being as a fan for the last 10 years, and most people who can call themselves Mean Green fans have probably never experienced something like that before. So um, again, you're looking at the last 10 years of okay football where you're competitive, but you're not really doing anything remarkable. You're not making a long term investment in winning. This year kind of proved that you can do that. It sucks
Yeah.
that everybody's gone now, but it shows that it can be done at North Texas. You can win. You can field a competitive football program here, and there's no reason to assume that just because we're not Texas Tech or Texas or A&M or whoever that's not possible. So we got. I think if you want to use the term lucky, we did get really lucky with a lot of young talent last year. Uh, and again, it stinks that it's all basically gone now. But I think at least kind of looking at where we're sitting, you do have 44 returning players, which is a lot more than I guess I would have assumed we would have had, given the state of losing a head coach and having debatably, well, I don't even think it's debatable, the best season in program
Yeah.
history. Um, you'd assume you're probably going to lose a lot more talent than that. So it is nice to see 44 returning players, and plenty of them are guys that either got minutes or were impact players last year, even if they weren't, Mestamaker, Hawkins, and White Young. So um, there's talent all just through the returning players. There's a ton of talent here that can still be a difference maker for the 26 team. And I think that's good for a lot of these guys who are coming in. I think Neil Brown's approach has been kind of hammer hometown Texas players who can come in from Power Four programs and be guys who can give some playing time, and they're going to come in and at least have 44 guys who were a part of that team last year, and the culture maybe that Eric Morris kind of culminated here, which I commented on a couple of times. I said during a couple podcasts last year that you could notice how much fun these guys were having playing football. Um, there were smiles on the sidelines, and everybody was so amped and just animated all the time. Even when we weren't winning, which was not often, it was still fun to whenever we were losing and scoring touchdowns, which was not often. The energy was still there, and that's evidence of, like I said a couple times last year, a really good culture. And I think that Eric Morris definitely left a culture to pass over into Neil Brown's era. There's a good energy around the program still, even after losing so much talent. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I think the floor's been raised, and looking at the class we brought in, you're not going to replace a handful of All Americans and school record setters just like that. That just doesn't happen. Wouldn't happen at really any school. But as far as the talent we brought in, I think there's no reason not to be excited going into next year. We'll talk about some of the individual guys, but I think where the football program stands, we have a good blend of incoming talent from P4 schools that can, guys that can capitalize on having more playing time, and they're going to blend well with 44 returning players from a 12-win team. So you can't really ask to be in a better spot after the mass exodus, I don't think. And everything I've heard from Coach Brown so far has led me to, buy in and have some confidence. So I think things are good.
Yeah, for sure. Before we kind of move on, did want to touch a little bit on the bowl game. 49-47 win over San Diego State. Kind of, I think at certain points of the game, it felt like either we were in control or maybe we were kind of shaky and maybe letting a team on their third string quarterback creep back into the game when we shouldn't have. San Diego State outscores us 27-7 in the fourth quarter, so not the best there. But overall, I think you looked at the team; they looked squared in and focused on the bowl game. Caleb Hawkins was a guy who I mentioned on the preview pod. I didn't think he was going to play. I just didn't think it made sense for him, where he was clearly going to enter the transfer portal. Was coming off the shoulder injury against Tulane, and he shows up and he rushes for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, and picks up another 25 yards on 3 catches and a touchdown receiving. So just a huge game by Caleb Hawkins, set the freshman touchdown rushing record. I think NCAA freshman rushing touchdown record. Certainly North Texas single season record. Really happy to see that he played and had a great game. Ashton Gray, another 152 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns in kind of a breakout performance. Unfortunately, he's headed off to ECU with Jordan Davis going to be offensive coordinator there. But one just wanted to pat my back a little bit here because my 2 guys who I mentioned as kind of being my picks to click in the bowl game were Cameron Dorner at receiver, and then on defense, Will Jones. Dorner had 66 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, and Will Jones had 14 tackles as well as a pick and forced fumble. So really big final games for those 2 seniors. Really happy that we got to add them to the program for a year, and really they finished the job for sure. So really happy to see what they did. But overall, I mean, look, San Diego State I think was a really solid bowl opponent. I think they were one of the better kind of G5 programs in the country last year. And they're, unfortunately, they're probably a bigger name program across the country. They're, you ask people who San Diego State is, I think they're more likely to know than North Texas, football, unfortunately. But, regardless, you went out, took care of business, won the bowl game. Like I said, maybe a little shaky at times, but overall, kind of what are some of your just kind of quick thoughts on, the game as it played out?
It was a little stress-inducing. I had to go back and rewatch this game. It actually happened when I was on my flight back from Christmas break, so I didn't get to watch the game as it happened until the plane actually got stalled out at the tarmac at DFW for about an hour. So they gave us free Wi-Fi, and I got to tune into the game with 7 minutes left while we were sitting on the ground just waiting to get taxied in. So I got to watch the end. It was definitely a little stress-inducing, but it was nice to kind of go back and just watch the game in full with certainty that we were going to win. You mentioned Cam Dorner. He's really my biggest gripe, more so than losing all these guys after that bowl game, is that some of these guys are NFL players possibly down the line that are not going to really be representing us. I think Cam Dorner is getting, at least a little bit of a sleeper look as a draft pick this year, which he definitely should. He was one of my favorite players last year. I know he was yours too. Loved his performance. Obviously great to see Hawkins get the rushing record. It was a positive ending to a great season. It was a little bittersweet because I think within 20 minutes of the game being over, Hawkins announced he was gone. Mestermaker was not soon far behind. It took him a couple days, but it was weird. You're just watching that game live, or at least the final minutes of it for me, knowing this is kind of the end of this amazing season. It was a little bit of a bummer, but the game was fun. Even if you win a bowl game by 2 points, that who cares how you win it? Just get the win. So, it was nice to see the offense go out there and kind of do their thing, and they pulled that script out of their pocket from a couple times this year where they would go up 21, 28 points early on and then kind of stall out maybe a little bit, or not stall out, but just kind of foot off the gas pedal a little bit, and the other team would find a way to get back into it. So I remember checking my phone when we took off. It was 14-3 or 14-6 or something. And then I turned it back on. It was 49-40, and I was like, what happened? What did I miss? So, even when the game wasn't a complete blowout this year, this team was really just entertaining, and that's all you can ask for. I obviously hope that's more of the brand we continue with the Neil Brown era. But it was a fun, entertaining bowl game, and I'm glad we won it. I agree. I think that San Diego State is about as good of an opponent as you could have asked for after losing to Tulane the way we did. Obviously, with a 11-1 regular season for your college football team, you probably hope to have a little bit of a better bowl game, but for where we are and where we needed to be this year, and just getting a bowl win being of the most paramount importance, I think it would have left a lot of really sour, just bitter taste in our mouths if we had not won that game. So I don't really care if it was San Diego State or Alabama or whoever. Just I'm glad we won a bowl game. I'm glad that now when we bring transfers and recruits in, there's some hardware in the trophy case and say, hey, look last year what we did. And you can look at the school records and be like, hey, you want to come here and break this record? Somebody did it last year. So, yeah, I think it set the precedent, and I have opinions about the transfer portal that I have no interest in talking about tonight, but solely in the vacuum of North Texas football, I'm glad that the season ended the way it did, and I'm glad that there are a couple people either not still with the program, but that graduated as seniors, played their last bit of college football here. Guys like Shane Witter and Cam Dorner and players like them that at least got the good send off as Mean Green players. I'm happy for Drew. I'm happy for Caleb. I'm happy for Wyatt. All those guys, Weslowski. But even still, I really want to emphasize how glad I am that there are possible next level players that are going out as Mean Green. So
yeah, no, for sure. You always want, there's Upton Stout, former Mean Green, was playing in he's playing for the 49ers. So, he was playing, in the NFL playoffs, but he didn't have North Texas next to his name, despite us signing him out of high school. So yeah, to Carter's point, it's like, you get the guy for his freshman or sophomore year or whatever, and he leaves. Like when he's playing on Sundays, your school is not going to be next to his name. Whereas, a guy like Cam Dorner, who has a real shot at, being drafted or at least getting a very solid look in the undrafted free agent market. Gabe Blair, 5-year player at North Texas. You get to see those guys go to the next level with, North Texas next to their name. So that's, you definitely, definitely helps make you root for those guys a little extra than the guys who maybe started their career for you. But yeah, no, it was a really good group. We can't name every single player from the roster this year, but it was a fun group. It was a fun group to watch and follow and cover. And I don't have any ill will towards anybody in that group. It was definitely a group of guys who were focused on the mission, and they took care of the job, and got 12 wins. So forever grateful to those guys. But yeah, going into season 1 of the Neil Brown era, 2026. North Texas signed, I think, 51 or 52 transfer portal guys. So a huge transfer portal class. And, a lot of different themes among the portal class. You had themes of connections, coaches, new coaches bringing their guys from their last school. You had a lot of guys who were DFW or Texas guys kind of coming back home. I think that was a big common theme. And I think another theme was just you saw a lot of guys from Power 4 schools, even more so than the past. And I think what I really liked about a lot of the Power 4 guys we picked up is that they actually have a track record as a college football player. They're not just a P4 guy who signed there out of high school and sat the bench for 3 years and then decided to transfer to North Texas. Like some of these guys, in a lot of times it was at different schools where guys were at FCS or G4, G5 or lower level P4 standouts who then moved up to big schools like Oklahoma or Missouri, and maybe didn't quite pan out at the bigger SEC school or Big Ten school or whatever. But then now they come back to North Texas on the G5, G6 level, and now they're a little more seasoned, but have again have proven that their track record that they are legit college football, Division I football players. That's a really good. I think that's a really good kind of player to target. Guys who, like I said, they've proven they can play at your level. I'll mention one name real quick. We got Zakai Barker, linebacker from SMU, but 2 years ago he was at East Carolina and he was second team All-American Conference. So you got a guy who was second team All Conference in your conference coming to play for you, and so that's the kind of prospect that I think is really intriguing to me. Where you're not just plucking guys from, we had some good hits on the D2 or FCS level, but we got we got guys who are those kind of top level guys, but who maybe had a cup of coffee in P4 and are I think even more seasoned than if they had just come to you straight out of an FCS or whatever. But yeah, like, again, huge class. I think it was really impressive. It looked like Neil Brown put together a really solid coaching staff. He was pretty meticulous about his hiring. I think maybe fans wanted it to be a little bit quicker, but I think he was doing his job. And I think everything Neil Brown has shown so far is that I think he gets it. He's a seasoned coach. He knows what he's doing. He's not learning on the job. He's parlaying his extensive experience as a FBS head coach into this job here at North Texas and Denton. And yeah, just like I said, really solid class, solid coaching staff. You could tell he really hit on some of these like kind of off field kind of coaches, like the general manager kind of roles. Like those guys seem like they have a lot of good connections and helped build this roster. So Carter, what are kind of some of your thoughts on the the transfer portal class and the group of guys coming in that Neil Brown was able to put together?
Yeah, I'm on record on this podcast as really pining for whoever our head coach is to. I really want this program to hammer exactly what Neil Brown did, which is find guys who have the talent to play at P4 schools, but maybe don't have the talent to get heavy minutes, or maybe are kind of second or third string guys at bigger name programs. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the best way to succeed in the current state of college football, the Wild West, as some people call it. Especially when you have to, transfer or hammer the transfer portal as hard as you do. I think that's a safer route than, striking gold like we did last year with these guys who all had, maybe some fun stories of not having played in a while or not getting any looks out of high school. That's all fun, but you can't bank on that as a long-term recipe for success. But yeah, you mentioned, a couple of guys like Jaheim White. That's a really talented running back coming from West Virginia who,
big time.
Obviously Neil Brown has some West Virginia ties, but to get a player like that coming over, you mentioned some all-conference talent. Like there's what's the guy's name from UCF, the quarterback? Taven Jackson?
Yeah.
Taven Jackson. Not the greatest stat sheet ever, but definitely the talent is there. There's guys up and down this hall that, you're looking at schools like Arkansas and Missouri and West Virginia and Baylor, and there's Utah. There's schools everywhere where these guys are 3-star, sometimes 4-star prospects that just don't get playing time elsewhere. Again, I think that's like the safe way to go, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think it's just, if you're going to be a program of our size where you're not, a basement dweller, G5, G6, whatever, but you're not a P4, big name program, that's the best way to win. And so I'm looking up and down, I think we have a top 70 class on 247. Last I checked, it was like 65th or 60 something, somewhere in there. So, I love that. I know not all 140 teams are super hammering the transfer portal, but still, it's nice to have a relatively successful haul there. And I also like that we spread out positionally the guys we're bringing in. There's multiple quarterbacks, multiple running backs, multiple wide receivers. You can go really down the whole position group for both sides of the ball, and there's guys everywhere. Multiple edge rushers, multiple cornerbacks. I think that, especially when you're starting from square one and you're in the position we're in, I think that's definitely a good way to kind of insure yourself. Just free insurance is to get 3-4 guys at every position, and at least every single position group that they've researched here, there's one guy who stands out as this guy could be an immediate game changer for us. So yeah, I'm happy with the haul. There's talent from even schools like Texas. We have guys coming in from the SEC and the Big 10 and Big 12 that they can play, and so I think it'll hopefully be a very good first year in terms of setting the precedent within the system of guys you want and going forward, what kind of talent haul Neil Brown can get in year out. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like, I think what the team did with, in particular on the offensive line. And I mentioned this. I listened to a lot of the Dave Campbell College Football podcast with Mike Craven and Carter Yates, and something that Mike Craven always kind of brings up when it comes to, especially at the G5 G6 level, is that the athletes on the lines are just different at the P4 level. He's like, even just visually, he's like, you you go on the sideline and you look at G5 G6 teams versus P4 teams, like the skill players visually look pretty similar. Maybe the receivers are a little taller, the quarterbacks are a little taller, maybe running backs are a little bit heavier, but for the most part, the skill guys are kind of similar visually in terms of, they're comparable athletes. But where it really, the stark contrast really is on the lines, on the offense defensive lines. They're just there's only so many of these guys that really have that P4 type of frame, and the P4s are very eager to scoop all those guys up and keep more than their fair share and stash guys, in case that they work out. So it's hard to get kind of some of those premier, left tackle kind of frames, or defensive end 6'5" defensive end kind of frames, and UNT was able to grab a few of those kind of guys, which was really impressive. On the offensive line, Neto Umazulu, he's a 4-year guy at Texas, played in 26 games, was kind of was in contention for a starting job there going into last season. So 6'4", 325, like that is a big, imposing offensive lineman. Another offensive lineman who Neil Brown kind of brought from his connection from West Virginia was a guy he signed out of high school at West Virginia, is offensive lineman. I'm trying to look at his name. Johnny Williams the fourth. He started, I think, 4 games for Neil Brown in 2024. Went to Missouri last year. Was at one of the best offensive line rooms in the country last year. I think Missouri had 2 first-team All-SEC offensive tackles, so that's who Johnny Williams was playing behind there. So 6'7", 320 something. So like just a really, like I said, really elite frame that you just don't get a ton of those kind of guys at the G5 G6 level. Henry Fanuku from Missouri was a guy who played at North Crowley with under Ray Gates, who's now your edge coach. So that's another just big offensive line pickup. And then a guy I really liked on the defensive line is Stephen Curtis, who's coming from Minnesota. He didn't play really for Minnesota last year, but you look at the season before that, he was a standout defensive end for Illinois State, and you got Illinois State's defensive line coach Ben Black to come to Denton, and Illinois State made the FCS national championship game. So that was, again, that's a frame, a 6'5", 260-pound defensive end. You don't get a ton of those, and to be able to land that guy from a connection where he was a really solid FCS defensive lineman at as an underclassman, goes to Minnesota and kind of gets buried on the depth chart a little bit. Again, now he comes to North Texas, where I think he's going to be able to kind of continue growing as a solid Division I contributor football player. So that's another thing I'm excited about. But again, Jaheim White, I think kind of want to take a little bit of extra time to talk about him, because that is a premier pickup. I mean, Jaheim White, his freshman year at West Virginia, 842 yards, 4 touchdowns, 7.7 yards a carry, was the leading rusher and basically the best offensive player on a 9-4 Big 12 team. And then 2024, 845 yards again. So going into last year, I think he was a Big 12 all-conference preseason kind of guy. So, I mean, he's not just, a guy from a Big 12 school, right? Like he is a standout, kind of one of, if not the best player on some of those, West Virginia teams during his time there, and when Neil Brown was still there. But, like Carter said, I mean, that's just a huge pickup. I think we all were just super impressed by Caleb Hawkins and couldn't believe how good a year he had for us. But it, I don't know if Jaheim White is going to match him in terms of statistics, but I fully expect Jaheim White to have a huge breakout impact season. I think he's the kind of running back who just changes things for you, makes defenses really have to worry. Is there anybody else who you kind of were really impressed by? The staff picking up.
Yeah, there was one guy I circled that I'm really excited about is Jabri Bickham from Boise. Uh,
Yeah,
Coming out of high school, he was very, very highly touted. Um, I kind of went through some of like the Boise like recruiting profiles for him when they signed him. I think it was 2024, and they were extremely, extremely excited. I know he redshirted for a year, but a lot of people talk about his athletic ceiling and kind of he was a two-way player in high school too. So um,
hmm
great athlete, definitely someone that I'm excited to. He seems like a guy kind of last year when we picked up so many great glue guys on defense. He seems like one of those guys that could be a difference maker this year. So I'm really excited about him. Obviously, Jaheim White is huge. Hope he can stay healthy after last year, but um, he's a really shifty, tiny running back. Him and Brendan Haygood both, I think, could make a good kind of 1-2 punch.
yeah,
Um, I think kind of going through the last couple of years of Mean Green football, really before last year, it was often kind of a running back by committee. Um, Before Caleb Hawkins just completely stole the spotlight this year. I think we could probably see some of that this year. Both Brendan Haygood and Jaheim White are equally talented running backs. So um, I think both of them could kind of be a 1A 1B type situation maybe, or you know maybe Brendan Haygood comes in on second and third down. I don't know, but um, I think it's really good that you look at all the guys we brought in. Those are two guys that are kind of near the top at the same position.
yeah,
So it's nice to have some solidarity and some comfortability at an offensive position where you're losing an All American, nationally prominent player. But there are a couple other guys, guys I highlighted through my list. I like Keyshawn DeVille a lot, defensive back coming over from Arkansas. I think he's got some really good size. Um, he's a little undersized in terms of weight, but I like that he's 6'1" and has great speed. He's got SEC kind of athleticism. I watched
yeah,
some of his tape. Um, Wesley Hudson's another guy I think could be an immediate impact on the line. I mean, there's guys kind of all throughout here. You know, like I said, you're picking up guys from Cal and Arkansas and Texas. The Texas lineman, I can't pronounce his last name. Is it Neto?
yeah. Neto Umazulu.
Neto, yeah, I know you mentioned him. Love his size on the offensive line. Like you said, he's a 4-year guy coming from Texas. So um, I definitely like to circle guys like that have a ton of experience. And even when you're bringing in guys in the transfer portal, you want experience and seniority sometimes. So um, yeah, I mean, I think there's guys everywhere. I think Josiah Martin could be a playmaker at
Yeah,
receiver coming over from Oklahoma. Um, yeah, I'm really about as happy as I could be. Again, my primary takeaway here is that you're losing, you know, three of the best players this program has ever seen all at once. How do you, and not to mention pretty much all their backups and friends are going with them. So you literally cannot replace all that talent at once. But for a first year head coach trying to reestablish himself, trying to reestablish this program after losing everybody, I think you really can't complain with this haul. I think there's just depth everywhere, enough upside. I talked about kind of last year being like a floor raiser for the program, kind of mirroring that. I think that this class has a lot of a high ceiling. Like I think there's tons
yeah,
of athleticism here. I think there's maybe not so much um, star talent. I think like we kind of said, Jaheim White's probably the most decorated
hmm
player of the bunch, which isn't saying a lot. He's had a good college career so far, but he's had two good seasons and got hurt last year. So I would say that the ceiling is high for this group of guys, and there's kind of like I said with the defense last year. You found a bunch of glue guys, just a bunch of transfers who can come in and make an immediate impact. I think there's plenty of guys throughout here who could be, first year impact guys for us this fall.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and I think another guy, kind of Carter's touching on defensive backs. Another guy I wanted to mention, especially with Carter being here, is Caden Jenkins. He was 3-year guy at Baylor, had 18 starts, 31 appearances for Baylor, 11 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. Had a really prolific first 2 seasons at Baylor, as true freshman, 3 interceptions. Sophomore, had a solid starting season there too, and kind of fell off. I think got kicked off the team, but just overall like a really lengthy cornerback who, again, just Big 12 caliber, legit Big 12 caliber guy. You don't typically see those kind of guys come to North Texas. Unfortunately, 6'1" cornerback, with a lot of skins on the wall. So that was another guy. Kind of, Carter mentioned guys like Keishan Davila and Burkham, from Boise State, or was it Bickham? Sorry, Jabri Bickham. So
Yeah.
they really targeted height in the secondary, and these guys are all 6'1" plus. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out with having that much height at cornerback is really impressive. But yeah, and then Carter talked about Jaheim White and Brendan Haygood, the 2 running backs. Yeah, I think that you look at this team and the coaching staff. I think the DNA of this offense is going to be very different than the Eric Morris offense. You look at Neil Brown, your head coach and play caller. You've got your run game coordinator and tight end coach Mike Blesh, who was offensive coordinator here a few years ago, and then who's it? Chad Scott, running back coach, who was Brown's offensive coordinator at West Virginia. Those 3 guys are kind of the top dogs on the offensive coaching staff. They're all run the damn ball kind of guys. So you look at the offensive line they sign, and the size there, and then having White and Haygood, like, this team is going to want to run the ball. So I think that's going to be fun. Like I said, they're that's going to be in this team's DNA, and they're going to want to impose themselves physically. So looking forward to that. I think there's definitely a time and a place for the fun passing attack, and you like to be able to strike a balance like we did last year. So I think absolutely can. And then you look at Taven Jackson, like Carter mentioned. Look, he started all 12 games for Central Florida last year, the Big 12 level. That's just really invaluable experience at the quarterback position that it's hard to replicate, bringing in guys like that at North Texas, guys who full season starters at the Big 12 level, and you got a lot of that. So yeah, just really excited about a lot of the guys they're bringing in. Like, you could have a last year starting quarterback from Big 12 starting quarterback, Big 12 starting running back, Big 12 kind of SEC kind of guys on the offensive line. Like, that's that's really impressive, and definitely kind of the direction that you want to be heading in as a program. And then sign some high school guys, a lot of DFW guys. So I think you're going to see Neil Brown gets it. He gets what it takes to kind of win in Denton. He's familiar with Denton. He's been coaching coaching against North Texas for basically 2 decades now, going back to his Troy days. So he gets what it takes here and what matters here. And the high school connections. Signed Ray Gates, be your edge coach, who is one of the top high school football coaches in the area. So it seems like he gets it. He's only 45 years old, but he's got 10 years of FBS head coaching experience. So that's really I think something that he's kind of showing off right now, is that he knows what he's doing. So any kind of final thoughts here, Carter, going into spring and that off season kind of time of football, where they're kind of baking in the oven right now?
Yeah. You mentioned Caden Jenkins really quick. The only thing I can kind of gather on him is that I know Baylor fans are kind of frustrated with his decline in play over the 2-3 years he was there. I think he kind of started out with a lot of promise. I can't remember what year he started there, but I do remember, people kind of mentioning that he started getting burns a little bit and kind of seemed to lose a step a little bit physically. So again, another guy who has the athleticism, has the upside, but you're talking about
get
like
him for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about the coaches like Neil Brown and a lot of the assistants, some of the guys he brought back that have been here before. Again, I hate to kind of sound like a broken record, but there really is just such a high ceiling. Like I think the ceiling for this group, specifically for this year, is raised along with the floor, and I'm very happy with the overall haul. I'm very happy with the coaching staff. Um, Again, I'm excited that we're having a spring game. I think that's a really, if you want to talk about that, we can. But I love that
Yeah,
that's
no,
something we're doing, especially maybe just for 1 year for a first year coach trying to open up the program for people to see what he's doing.
yeah, for sure.
I don't really care about it year in year out, but I think for this year it's a great idea. Um, Again, it feels like there's some stability, which it might be feigned, it may be fake, but placebo, I guess. But it really does feel like the program has been stabilized after a really, just the only phrase you can use is a mass exodus. Um, you're losing basically everybody who contributed to last year's success, and it does not feel like we're going into 2026 with our hands in the air kind of saying, well, hope this works. Obviously there's a lot of question marks, a lot of unknowns, but like I said, from the 44 returning players, there's guys like, Chris Jemerson could step up and win the quarterback job. I think getting him back is huge.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Jaden Bex is a running back. We know how talented he can be. I said all year last year, I think Jaden Bex is going to be a great football player. I just think that he needs time to develop. There's guys everywhere, and I think that the team going into this fall, hopefully, as long as there's not any big shakeups before then, could really kind of carry over some of the momentum from last year instead of it having to be like well, we got to replicate what we did, in 2025, and the pressure's on. Like I feel like, probably not going to beat Indiana, but if you can get past the Indiana game and go into the season with some momentum, I think this is a team that could maybe make some noise in the American. So,
Yeah,
uh, not setting the expectations too high, but I just like the thing I'm grateful for is the kind of stable feeling that the program has right now, where it does not feel like we're, firing shots in the dark. It feels like something
yeah,
is there's a plan in place. We have a head coach, like you said, who's young but still has that tenure and that composure. Um,
yeah, for sure.
Pretty solid track record, even though he didn't really win at West Virginia. But um, yeah, I think there's good vibes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. And I will give him credit. I think West Virginia, he really had kind of a sour reputation, I think, in terms for a lot of fans there at the end. But I mean, you look at, I think, just part of it. It's kind of like when we fired Seth Luttrell. It's like, hey, we were ready for something new. I think West Virginia was in a similar situation where it's like he wasn't doing bad. I mean, his last year 6-6, year before that 9-4. Like he didn't end things with the program in shambles or anything. But I think they were just after 6 years they just kind of wanted to go a different direction. So I would say not not like he was just a complete failure there, but also I think he's taken a year off and learned from kind of been able to kind of postmortem his tenure there and see what how as a head coach going forward he can kind of maybe solidify himself. And he did talk about he felt like his next job was going to be in the American Conference and kind of that top G5 G6 level. So I think it was a good fit for both sides. But yeah, no, I mean I'm excited. I think like you said, spring ball would be great to have a spring game. I know it's not that situation hasn't been what it used to be 10 years ago, or you just always look forward to the spring game and be a decent crowd.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's a different world of college football, but definitely, like you said, a good chance to kind of earn some goodwill with the fans and media, kind of showcasing your team a little bit instead of just hiding them, like we kind of see a lot of
Yeah.
teams do these days. But yeah, no, that's it. That's all I got. Carter, any closing thoughts? Any final word here?
Um, Not without divulging some hot-headed opinions about the transfer portal and the state of college football, and that's for another day. It was a really fun year, and uh, now we got to move forward. I feel like it's like the Luca trade. I got over the hump, if you want to call it that. Or I guess whatever the opposite of the hump is, the pit.
Mhm.
Um, we got through, or we got through the valleys, right?
Yeah,
Now it's
for
time
sure.
to see the sunshine again. So it was a great season. Sucks that we lost everybody, but excited for this year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if you made it this far, again, thanks again for listening, and go Mean Green.
Going green.